Although I was still seeking external validation that I hadn't yet realized at the time, like I was still seeking to feel something that would make me feel successful. That would, so people would know that I'm successful. So I would feel happy and good inside. I basically went through 5 years of what I call struggling entrepreneurship, where I hustled harder than anybody I knew, completely against my manifestor design, by the way. And I really did everything that I thought it took to be successful. And I ended up in over 6 figures of debt, burnt out, and just like really desperate, I guess, in a way. Like I still always held the vision. I knew that it would get better, but it felt so hard. It felt like a hole that I was never gonna get out of.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode on Carpe, Diem, Living the Podcast. I am your host, Shane Gitmed, and today we are on the eastern side of Canada with Miss Viola, and I am just so excited to chat with her today because the funny thing is, I didn't fully realize that we were already connected on social media. We're both manifestors, and you guys know on the show we have talked about human design, so I think it's cool that we have a manifestor on the show. So yeah, tell us about you and your background and just some of your story with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and to everyone listening. It's so great to connect. I always love being able to like share my story and kind of like enlighten you into the way that I see the world and the things that I've been through. But I currently live in Canada. I'm originally Canadian. I have a super confusing geography upbringing, but I lived in a lot of places. The majority of the time outside of Canada, I lived in New Zealand, which is where I met my husband, who now lives with me here in Canada with our gorgeous little baby who's half a year old-ish at the moment. So I'm a new mom, which is also fun. And I have been like a visionary and an entrepreneur at heart, I think, all of my life. I've always had this kind of like inner knowing, this inner sense that I wanted to do something that would feel very purposeful and fulfilling. Just doing something for the sake of doing it was never an interest for me. I was always just like, I want to change the world. I want to feel this way. I want to help people. Like, and
Yes.
I would always, and when you're a kid, it comes through in different ways. Like, I remember when I was like super young, I was like, I'm going to create a store and everything's going to cost 1 cent so that everyone can afford it. Like, clearly no idea of the economy back then, but it was just like, I've always had some sort of vision, and as life would have it, I went through enough things to make me really grow and expand so that I could become a leader in a lot of the things that I really desire to experience and lead in my life. Like, I had a pretty like rough in terms of mental health teenage and early 20s years of my life. I lost my dad to cancer when I was 16, which kind of triggered a lot of it. And it kind of sent me down this spiral. But through that time, the gift in that really was that I learned how to get back in touch with myself. I learned how to listen. I learned how to slow down, to my inner self. And I started to learn the power of validating ourselves versus seeking external validation. And that was only really scratching the surface. And I was also introduced to spirituality through that time, very surface level, but like The Secret and that kind of stuff. Then the next phase of my life, I'd met my soon-to-be husband one day, man. My life was kind of just shifting and changing, and I decided to step into the world of entrepreneurship. And although I was still seeking external validation that I hadn't yet realized at the time, like I was still seeking to feel something that would make me feel successful. That would, so people would know that I'm successful. So I would feel happy and good inside. I basically went through 5 years of what I call struggling entrepreneurship, where I hustled harder than anybody I knew, completely against my manifestor design, by the way. And I really did everything that I thought it took to be successful. And I ended up in over 6 figures of debt, burnt out, and just like really desperate, I guess, in a way. Like I still always held the vision. I knew that it would get better, but it felt so hard. It felt like a hole that I was never gonna get out of. And that time, though, the gift in that was that it really forced me to look at my relationship with money and abundance. It forced me to look at what's the layer deeper. Like when I talked about external validation before, this was like taking it a whole new level deeper and actually realizing that to feel abundant, to feel successful, to feel worthy, to feel loved is all an internal game, right? And so that was the gift. And then that's when I had my sort of next real huge spiritual awakening. And that was around the time that I decided to launch a coaching business. I found out about human design. Surprise, surprise. I had my Saturn return. Like all these crazy things were happening. And suddenly I went from this place of like always looking for the answers outside of myself to being so in tune with myself, my spirit guides, like fully opening up my psychic gifts. And I personally like using the word psychic because I feel like as a manifestor, you know, we're a little bit activating and triggering. And I feel like I like using that word because I used to have a very funky relationship with saying the word psychic because of a lot of kind of stigma around that term. You know, like I used to just call it like my intuition. But now I'm just like, nah, I'm psychic as F. Like, the same with money. It's a very triggering topic for people. And I used to feel very cautious around talking about money and desire for wealth and abundance in our lives. But now I know that it is okay to love money, especially for us soulful entrepreneurs who desire to help the world and create really amazing things, because wealth in the hands of people who have a pure, amazing, loving, caring heart is like the best thing that could ever happen to this world. So
Yeah.
I love saying about that as well. And yeah, I started my business at the start of 2018. 6 months into my business, or 6 months-ish, I decided with my husband to sell all of our belongings and travel the world full time. I'd only just started making money in my business off the back end of all of this debt and, you know, whatever. We felt like we were completely crazy, but my intuition was guiding me there. And so we started traveling the world. We traveled for 1.5 years until I got pregnant before the pandemic, clearly. And I built my business to multiple 6 figures in that time, really just like working with my spirit team, helping other people get connected with themselves, working on their energetic alignment. And today I am a psychic coach and a channel for 6-figure entrepreneurs who are wanting to create more expansion and wealth and impact in their lives, but through purpose, like through feeling so connected and through feeling like all of their parts of their life are amazing, not just like one area.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And no, I totally get what you mean. Like when you finally feel like you're in alignment and that everything just starts to flow. And yeah, it's and the timing of it all. And you touched on a very important part with the money and the abundance aspect, because until you get that under control or get that figured out, the abundance is going to come to a halt. Or yeah, you're going to accrue debt. Or because I remember even myself like years ago, because you know, you grow up with this conditioning, which as you get older and you find out about human design, I think, first of all, deconditioning is so freeing. You feel like, oh my gosh, like that weight is off of my shoulders. And I feel like I can finally move forward in life where it feels right. Like it just doesn't feel like I'm pushing and shoving my way through, because I can relate with you when it comes to like hustling and hustling and hustling, working like a generator when that's not what you were built to do at all. And then you get frustrated because you aren't seeing the same results. And then you physically feel ill because you're just so tired. Like I burnt myself out. Like, well, we don't have our sacral, so we cannot operate against what what we weren't designed to do. And I think once we figure that out and we find our flow, then everything just falls into place and it all makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I think that's so cool. So before we even recorded, I mentioned to Viola how I was like, yeah, I was told, because being an empath and you pick up on things, someone was like, oh, I think you're psychic. And I'm like, no, I'm just very intuitive. But Viola said something where she was like, actually, we all are psychic. We just have to tap in. So can you cover a little bit more on like what that means, especially if someone does feel like, yeah, you know, they are very psychic in this world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, when I use the term psychic, the reason I like that term is because I feel like it's like an umbrella term to everything. You know, we can talk about mediumship, we can talk about empaths, we can talk about clairvoyance, clairaudience, like all the different clairs. For those of you that aren't familiar with those, it's essentially just like the different ways that we are psychic. We hear a lot of the times, like we imagine it's like fortune telling, you know, like with a crystal ball and being like, oh, this is what's going to happen to you. Or it's like, I see like 3D projections in front of myself. Like we get so like hyped up because of what we see in movies or what we hear in fairy tales about what a deep intuition really means. But actually we are all connected in that, because how I see the world is like we're here as humans, you know, having this experience, but we are fueled by our soul having this experience as well. And so it's like there's a dualistic party of our human is here, and it is limited because it is, you know, it's life and death, it's day and night, it's polarity, it's all of these things. Like we come here for a short amount of time, and we are limited by our human conditioning around our fears of survival and all of these other things. But then at the same time, our human is also where we feel and experience everything that we desire to experience in this lifetime. And our soul is kind of like that cheerleader in the background that just knows you're innately safe, because it knows that this is just an experience as a human. It knows that you're innately worthy and abundant and all the things. And so it's kind of like, you've got this. And that's that little voice that you hear when you're just like, should I start a podcast? Should I go travel the world? Should I go do this? Like, that's your soul being like, yes, you can do it. And then the human, the mind's like, oh my gosh. But then when you actually do the thing, it's like that, the joy that you get to feel from that, like the warmth of a hug, the delicious food, like the fulfillment feeling of seeing people's lives change, like all those things are what we only can experience that because we're human. So I always say there's like this little dance that happens between those things. And I know it's kind of like off topic, but it's channeling through, so whatever. But then we're all that, right? Like, there's not like one person who doesn't have a soul. Like, we all have this experience, which means that we all actually have that connected part of ourselves. We are conditioned to not trust that. We are conditioned not to listen to it. And we are also, because we're conditioned to it being such a huge thing, that we think that it has to be this like big movie projection where we see like angels coming from the sky and like God speaking to us in order for us to believe we're intuitive. And that's the biggest reason I was blocked in my intuition for so long. When I actually worked with a coach who helped me develop my psychic abilities at the beginning of like me realizing that I was actually super psychic. And the number one thing I said all the time was, what? That's a psychic message? What? That happens to me all the time. Because clairvoyance, for example, which is the gift of sight, right? When people see, they see through their third eye. I see this, I see that. I have quite a strong gift of clairvoyance. I used to think it was seeing things in front of you, which is still possible. That happens to some people, but it's actually the exact same way we see an image that we imagine in our mind. If I say to you, imagine a tree, imagine a monkey, imagine walking into your kitchen and opening your fridge, the same way you're projecting images in your mind is the same way clairvoyance works. And so people discount it because they think it's just their imagination, right? And with empath, like I was saying to you before, that is having a heightened awareness of other people's emotions and what other people are feeling, which is also a form of psychic messages. It's just you're receiving messages through feelings and emotions, versus some people are receiving messages through visions, through imagination, right? So it is really interesting, and we all have that gift, and it amplifies as we pay more attention to it and actually nurture it and celebrate it rather than just discounting it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, the two ways where I know that my intuition or psychic, whatever abilities for me is, so these are two funny things. So one, I think the biggest one is, I don't know if in Canada you guys do this, but do you guys have like fantasy football or anything when it comes to
Yeah.
Okay, so like in here, a lot of people do fantasy football, or they put bets on different teams and who are they going to win, whether it's a basketball team or a football team. And I don't watch sports like that at all. Like, I just know like what gets posted online, or if someone tells me in passing, which, okay, cool. But I had a family member back in the day that would do a lot of fantasy football, and he would always ask me like, oh, who do you think is going to win out of this team? And I'm just like, I don't know. And then I would just like take a second, just look at the lineup or look at what the teams were. And I would just ask, okay, well, what's going on with the team? And he'll say, well, this player just got an injury here, or just kind of like what's going on in general. And then I'm like, I feel like this team will win. And they would win. And it's like, and it would happen over and over and over again. And don't get me wrong, there's times where I did get it wrong, but at least 90% of the time I was right. And I'm like, this is wild. I don't watch sports like this. How am I meeting other people that actually watch these games and are like, they've been watching sports since they were kids, and I'm over here just like, this one, and it'd be right. So,
and you know what's so interesting about that is, like, one, I can't believe you thought you weren't psychic. But two, this is like exactly what I used to do. I'd be like, oh yeah, I saw that, I had that idea in my head earlier, and they're like, yeah, it was an intuitive message. And I'm like, oh.
yeah, you're just like, well.
The interesting aspect of that is that you had less skin in the game, so to speak, where like you had no attachment to what the outcome was, and you had no real, like, you couldn't overthink the strategy or the whatever, because you don't have a super involvement in sport, right? So that's actually like a really good example to show like how sometimes our intuition works best when we don't have attachment to it. Because like, for example, with a lot of intuitives and even myself, like I do get incredibly clear guidance through my own spirit. And like, I always say spirit is my number one coach, because that's like how I channel all of my ideas and my business offers and everything. Even when I'm trying to get guidance for myself, I get so in my head about it because I'm so close to it that I'm overthinking every single detail, right? Like versus when I'm doing a reading for somebody who I've never met before, they're a brand new client or something, I'm just like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And it comes out in like perfect succession, exactly what they needed to hear, because I have no attachment or like ego thoughts attached to what their situation is. And so that's like a good example of that, versus like probably if you're trying to be like, okay, I'm going to get myself guidance, you get too in your head about it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's I thought that's been a very interesting thing that I've been able to do for years. And then another one, I mean, I don't know if this is other people, but like when you watch shows or movies, your prediction of what the ending will be is almost right. Like every time, like you at least get, so I don't know. I feel like I've always been really good at just seeing things at the finish line. Yeah. Before it happens. And then people are just like, how did you know? And I'm like, I don't know. So
do you have gate 44 in your human design?
To be honest, I don't know. Because I wouldn't be surprised. What's gate 44? Let's just.
Oh, gate 44, and there's one other one. If I'm not mistaken, it's gate 44 and 32, I believe. I like sometimes get them confused because like, I don't know if you like are into PHS, but I'm closed taste. So I'm only ever taking in what feels important to me. So I get confused with numbers, but they're the gates of patterns. So they like see patterns and they like can kind of like predict patterns. And so I have this gate in my human design. And so it was interesting for me is like when I was first starting my current coaching business and I decided like, hey, should we solo, shouldn't go traveling with no savings, no backup, no nothing. Like, just see what happens. We bought a one-way ticket to Germany. Like that was, and we had no money other than our tickets.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
It was insane.
Leap of faith.
But the interesting thing was my intuition was saying, yes, this is the right decision, not from a should perspective, not from like oh, maybe if I do it, I'll seem really cool. Oh, like that person traveled and their business was more successful and they didn't travel or blah, blah, blah. It was just like, I can't even explain this. I just know in my heart it's the right decision.
Right.
My ego, my fear was like, the last time you traveled, because part of a big reason why we were in so much debt is because we traveled quite a lot. Like we'd always think it's going to get better. So we'd buy tickets, and go traveling, and then it didn't work out very well. But then my ego is like, last time you did this, you ended up in a worse position. Don't be so naive. You're making the same mistake again. But what I love about that particular gate, for those that have it, this is like a total side note on human design, but it's like, you fear repeating the same mistakes. However, the wisdom from that gate, which is stronger than the fear, is that you sense patterns. So you'll always know if you're making the same mistake again, and you won't. So
got it.
It's a good one.
You know what? I just pulled up my chart as you're explaining that to me. And on the left side where it's red, I do see a 44, and it says 44 coming to meet the gate of alertness. Is that the one you're talking about?
44, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, see, so I do have that, because I was like, but this is one part of human design where I'm still investigating the heretic in me, just understanding all these different layers, because I do get overwhelmed when I see a lot of like numbers and data. I'm like, oh, there's just a lot going on here.
Have you just discovered PHS in human design yet?
I have not, but please. Let's cover that. Yeah.
It's like so intense. Like if you can get like an advanced chart and it says like your digestion and termination. I was just curious because it talks about how you like digest information.
Yeah.
So it's like, especially for a line one, I think it's good to know, because then like for me, my particular, I'm not a line one, but my particular type it's also about digesting food, but it's also about digesting information that you learn, is like, I'm only ever going to hear what seems important to me. So like I will pick and choose what I want to learn, and I'll forget everything else. And that is so me. And versus like my husband, he needs to like really focus on one thing at a time and like learn one thing and then come back and learn the other stuff later. And my son, even though he's only 6 months right now, but when he's at that age, like his particular style, he works best actually in the evenings and at night, or when he's like in the shade or away from the light. Like if he's in direct light, it messes with his learning capabilities. So it's like, really interesting. Like that's the part that I'm super nerding out on in human design right now.
Yeah, I'm about to get on this after our call here because that sounds really cool. I mean, my son, he's so he's a 5/1 projector, which I
Oh,
think is
cool.
so crazy. I'm like, okay, we're the same as far as 5/1, but yeah, he's a projector. I'm a manifestor. His dad's a manifesting generator. So it's like
Mhm.
we're all different things, but still have similarities. But yeah, it would be very helpful to know. That way, like as I'm homeschooling during this quarantine, I'll know like how to best help him.
I'll send you some Instagrams.
Oh, that'd be wonderful because yeah, it's
I
any
follow a couple people that teach like homeschooling stuff.
oh homeschooling applied with human design.
Yeah. Hmm.
Oh my God, that's freaking golden. Yeah, because I know I have seen some people that tailor their human design to like their child's chart and getting a reading on that. And I'm just like, just give me all the tools because I just like to be prepared and just have all the information at my fingertips. Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, that is so cool. So since we're talking about like psychic, spiritual, all the
Mhm.
things. So can you recall like the first time you really realized like as a child, like what were
Mhm.
some signs now that looking back, you're like, yeah, I really was psychic as a child, didn't even know.
I feel like I know a lot of people have like these like crazy stories of like seeing
Yeah.
ghosts and spirits and like their grandmother coming to talk to them at night. I didn't actually have anything like that. I think also because my strongest gift is called claircognizance, which is clear knowing. It's just like you instantly know something, right? I do have clairvoyance, but my clairvoyance, like if I were to explain how I receive a message, I'll get like a flash of an image in my head, and then everything just downloads through my clear cognizance of what that means, how to apply it, what to do next. Like,
Mhm.
so it's very like an instant knowing, and it's easy to not trust that particular type of knowing. And so I don't actually have memories of a child being like, I'm definitely intuitive. I mean, I went through a phase where I thought I was a witch. Like me and my best friend, when I was like 10 or 11, we literally ran away because our parents wouldn't believe we were witches.
Oh my God.
For like an hour, but still.
Oh my gosh, that is
um,
so funny.
Kids will be kids. But yeah, so I mean, I've always had this like inner sense when I look back, like the visionary in me, the part of me that just kind of had this knowing that I was gonna do this kind of work. I just didn't understand it when I was a child, you know, the part of me that just trusted that I could, you know, be who I was. Like even when I look back, like my manifestor senses, like I was so tapped into being a manifestor as a child, and then it was like punched and conditioned out of me.
Yes.
So
Oh
quickly.
my gosh. I know. When you said that, I'm like, oh, I know exactly what you mean because that happened to me. Like, and then just going through the deconditioning just to be like, no, like now I can live in my full truth. Like,
Yeah, like always feeling like, you know, you have to explain yourself, or like, you know, don't be such a leader, or don't, you know, la da da da.
you're
Anyway, so
bossy, and you're like,
yeah,
I just know what I'm doing. Like,
yeah. And so, I mean, the first time though that I like really kind of started to tap into this awareness that I was really like, where it became conscious, not just like a thing I thought I had, I decided to get my Reiki certification. This was actually before I had my like conscious spiritual awakening, but I got my Reiki certification in level 1 and 2. And the manifestor in me just initiating, I just decided like literally straight away to sign up to do Reiki at like a mind body spirit fair that was in my local area in New Zealand. And I did the Reiki session, like I did 15-minute sessions, and I had like maybe a handful of people stop in and pay for a session. And when I was doing it, I started to see all these intuitive messages, and I'd seen other people that I thought was really cool. And when I received Reiki in the past, like I had people give me spiritual intuitive messages. And so I kind of was like in my head, like, nobody knows me here.
yeah, yeah,
I'm like a complete random. This is a complete random. So I'm just going to pretend I'm intuitive and tell them what actually comes through, you know? And then if it doesn't resonate, then I can just go hide in the hole and it's fine. And so I was like doing the Reiki, and I was seeing like flowers and gardens and like all around her heart chakra and all this stuff. And then afterwards, she's like, oh, like, thanks. And I was like, so I just need to mention, like, I just noticed that I saw like, you know, gardens and flowers around your heart chakra, and it feels like it would be very nurturing for you to be in nature and like maybe a garden for healing your heart chakra or something. I can't remember exactly. And she was like, oh my God, you're blowing my mind. I'm a gardener, and that's what I do when I'm stressed. And I'm like, what just happened? Like,
yeah,
they're like, act cool, act cool.
yeah, yeah.
And so I was just like, oh my gosh, maybe there's something to this. And then it was just like little small things like that. And then, you know, like when I was first like really trusting my gift, I started doing readings for friends, and I started doing readings for random people online. And every time they were like, this just blew my mind. It is so on point. And when I started receiving messages for myself, I would like, launch something, and it would be absolutely incredible that just came through from a meditation that I asked my spirit team for an idea on, and so I started like witnessing things like that. And then that's when I just decided one day that I just have to trust my intuition no matter what, because it's when we second guess, we doubt, we like talk ourselves out of trusting the first thought that comes into our mind, or the first feeling, or the first sensation, that's when we actually block off our ability to connect with our intuition. Because if you imagine it like a channel, right? Like there's a channel between you and spirit, and there's all these messages being exchanged all the time. If you're just like, nope, that's not a message, it's kind of like you're just putting your hand up and like blocking the tube. You're just like, nope. But then if you say, oh my gosh, this is a message, then it's like the capacity for those messages increases, the tube gets wider, it gets bigger, everything becomes clear, it makes more sense. Right. But the first stage is this like willingness just to trust the message. And that's the scariest part, because our ego is like, yeah, but what if I'm wrong? But what if this? But what if that?
Out. Oh my gosh. Yeah, totally. It totally washes it out. And yeah, and I think that's why I'm really a big believer in energy healing, because if you have a lot of things that are clogging that, things are not going to come through right. And it's funny, like when you mentioned the launches, because that's the same thing for me. So like whenever I have like my intuition's like tingling, I don't know, it sounds like an inner voice, but it sounds like me telling myself, like it's like, yeah, it's like, Shane, this is what you need to do next. And if at first I'm like, really, like, do I really need to add more to my plate? Like that's my first instinct. But if I keep hearing it inside, like over and over and over, I'm like, okay, fine, like I'll do it. And that's kind of like what happened with this podcast. Is I felt a tugging, and then it helped me with my natural journey, or my holistic journey of just really getting right with myself on every level.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people with holistics, they think like, oh, is it just about, eating clean and all this juicing? I'm like, no. Like this is a very multi-layered thing. So
yeah, it's like the holistic, that word was like one of the first words that like pulled me into my purpose, I feel, because my whole life I felt like things are so connected, like I actually started off with a bachelor in nutrition, and I'm like a nutritionist, and I did health initially because I was so passionate about, health from losing my dad to cancer. And so it was like kind of a natural progression for me, but it never sat well with me to just be like, eat this food. Like I was like, there's more to the puzzle. It's like how you feel, it's your emotions, it's your relationships, it's how you move your body, it's how you think and respect your body, think about your body. And it was just like all these things. And then I learned about the word holistic, and I was like, this is it. It's like everything matters. And that's why like sometimes I talk about holistic success, because I do feel like that. I don't feel like success is a one-dimensional thing where we like tick it off of our list when we reach a specific income or hit a specific career goal or whatever. It's like success is a feeling that we embody as we're like feeling this alignment, this purpose, this fulfillment in all areas of our life. And I believe that that's so multi-layered, because if having a relationship in your life is important to you, then having a relationship that feels flourishing and abundant and connected is part of how you're going to feel fulfilled. But then if helping the world is also something that you're passionate about, then if you're not fulfilling that purpose, then you're never going to feel quite full, And so even though it's like kind of cliche, I often talk about like having it all, because I do believe that that's so much more possible. And it's not having it all to some external standard. It's having it all to what really lights us up, and getting so connected with ourselves that we can trust whatever we're called towards, whatever feels important for us, we're able to pursue and experience in our lives fully and wholly. And that's just the standard that I choose to live my life by.
I seriously can agree more, like 1,000%, because that's why like a lot of people that aren't manifestors, or they don't understand like why I feel called to do so many things, initiate so many different things, because I don't have any other manifestors in my life. So I'm like, I've always felt like the black sheep. Like I'm always just doing things just so different and so out of the box. But, and that question of like, when is enough enough? And I'm like, until I feel fulfilled. And it's like, there's so much work I want to do. There's so many things, places to see. And like, it just feels like the list is never ending, but that's okay. Cause I'm happy.
Yeah.
Like,
but it's not like, I mean, in my personal feeling as well, it's like, I'm never going to fucking stop. Like,
right. Thank you.
I'm never going to stop because I have so much that I want to do, but it's not like, it's not an empty searching. It's not like, how am I going to find it? Maybe in this next thing, it's like, I feel so amazing right now. And because I feel so good, I'm spilling over. You know what I mean? Like, that's the feeling.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah. Cause that's why it's just like, especially like with this podcast, this is like my latest launch, right? And there's like, people are telling me, they're like, what aren't you going to do? I'm like, I don't know, but ask me later. Cause right now.
Gosh, so in my, it's nearly been 3 years, I guess, since I've been in business. Wait, 2018, 2019, 2020. Yeah. So nearly 3 years. And this year basically has been me just having a baby. So I haven't done like a lot of external initiating, but in the first 2 years of my business, I traveled to like 5 continents and like every like week to a month, we were in a different location for a year and a half. I wrote a book that became a bestseller. Like I hosted a podcast. I like launched like so many different programs, built my business to multiple 6 figures. Like there's so many things that I did in that time. And I'm sure I'm like missing half of it in just those things. But it's like,
yeah.
People are just like, how did you do it? And I'm like, I don't know. I just did what I wanted to do and it happened.
Exactly. It's so true. Yeah, especially like when you're a manifestor that goes from working, you know, a 9 to 5. And who was it? So Holly Marie, have you seen her online?
Oh, love her. Yeah.
Okay. So she was a guest on the show recently, and yeah, she's amazing. And she posts all these great things. And one of them that she posted was, yeah, we don't like being told what to do. And I'm like, I know, because like, especially if you do work a 9 to 5 and you definitely don't agree with what you're being told to do, because it just doesn't feel right, or it's just, you know, there's a better way. It just does not work. And so that's why, like, as soon as I went on my own, like 8 years ago, I'm just like, oh, thank God, because I would have just kept being angry. And I don't know about you, but for me, like when I was an angry person in my younger years, I just thought, I was like, man, I must need like anger management or something. I was just so not aligned. And I remember just being just like complete opposite of how I am now. Right. It's like, as you discover like who you were born to be and getting on the right path, you're just like, oh, that was just part of the process, is part of the journey. And I don't need anger management. I just need to be aligned.
Oh, that's so it. And that's like when I like was young, I literally used to think like, what is wrong with me sometimes when I had like an anger outburst. And now I'm like the most chill person. I mean, I still have moments, but they're so short. You know what I mean? They're just like, oh, and then I'm like, it's fine.
Yeah.
So chill now. People who meet me now cannot even believe I used to be not like this, you know, because I'm just so chill, like fine. And, like, you know, most things I'm just like,
Yeah.
Like, I still care, but it's just like things don't faze me really as much anymore. Totally. I wanted to say before as well, when you were telling me the thing about like hearing the voice in your head, that's clairaudience. So clairaudience is the gift of hearing, right? And again, a lot of people think it's an external voice, which sometimes you might hear an external voice. Most commonly, especially when this gift is first starting to develop, you might hear your like name being called in a crowd, which maybe not as much with our pandemic right now, but like, you know, your name being called in a crowd, or high buzzing or tinnitus in your ear, or a knocking noise in your ear. That's like usually signs that your, you know, spirit's wanting to like connect through clear audience. But most commonly for clairaudience, it's like hearing your own voice in your own head. So you just think it's yourself talking to yourself. Yeah. You can usually decipher though, because the tone of it is usually speaking to you versus like, it's not like I should do this. It's like, you should do this. Right. And how you said, Shane, you should do this. It's like, that is fully spirit talking to you. So, I mean, you can leave this podcast interview knowing you are 100% psychic.
That is hilarious. Yeah. Cause like, I've kind of just gone on like my whole life, just like, oh, maybe not. I kind of danced around it, and that's why, like, because my friends know that's why they always ask me for like guidance and whatever, because they trust in what I have to say, which is part of the profile line 1. So I think the funniest part is like when you discover like you're this, and this, whether it's through human design or your personality type, and sometimes I get kind of lost. I'm like, I don't really know what this is coming from. Like, I don't know if it's,
Yeah.
yeah, like I'm always, I swear, I'm always diving into that stuff. But yeah, that's so funny. I'm gonna have to do some more.
I
Yeah.
mean, you can call it your intuition as well. You don't have to call it psychic if that doesn't resonate, but it's like you definitely have a gift. And if you just, like trust it, and this is for everyone listening, like you all have that gift, right? It's just coming through you in different capacities. If you just start paying attention and be like, maybe I am this. My like favorite method for expansion is playfulness, like just joy and playfulness and fun, because when we're so serious about it and we're like, oh, I'm psychic now I have to like be the channel like for spirit and like deliver all these messages, versus being like, well, if I was intuitive, what would my intuition be saying now? If that was an intuitive message, what could I do with that message? How could I trust it? This works for when you want to like make more money. This works when you want to grow your business. This works when you want to have better relationships, better communication. Like if you get a little bit playful with your goals rather than just so strict and serious, and have a little bit more compassion for yourself, just have fun with it, it's just so much better.
Yeah, I love that approach because I tend to be more on the because I'm a Capricorn too. So like we tend to have like more serious moments but then it depends on who you're around as well. I think when I'm alone, I'm very serious because I'm just kind of like I'm so deep into like the information I'm trying to learn, or I'm like working or whatever. But yeah, I like that approach because then it takes the weight off of like all this pressure of like, oh, I'm psychic, what do I do now with this? That's the last thing I would want to do.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like from now on, just being like, oh, if I notice that voice in my head, just like rather than like, oh my gosh, that was a message, was it? I don't know. Be like, what if it was?
Yeah.
Let's just pretend it was. Let's just play. And the next thing you know, you're like, I don't know, like channeling things for clients, like who knows?
Right. No, I know. And that's why I'm just like, I definitely want to hone in more on that stuff just because, yeah, I swear, like whenever I can't ignore the voice and it's literally me talking to me, I'm just like, oh my God, like, then I'm just like, fine, I give in. Like I literally just give in. So, and then when the results show the success of it, I'm like, well, that's why it was bugging me because it was going to happen. So.
And doesn't it, like in the moment, it's so easy to discount that and think it's just you talking to yourself. But when you look back and you're just like, that is a little bit weird that I'm like, Shane, you should do this.
Yeah.
Like, and why would you keep repeating it to yourself? Like it's so clearly spirit trying to convey you a message to you.
Yeah. And I'm so into angel numbers. So like I constantly, every time I see a certain sequence, like at least 3 times and it's like spread out, I'm like, oh, I got to dive into what this means. So that's like a whole nother thing that I follow, so that as far as signs go.
Yeah, that was my first kind of like opening to intuition actually, because I started trusting that and I started trusting the messages. And then it was just like knowing that I was being supported through trusting angel numbers was how I then allowed myself to trust, oh, maybe this was an intuitive message. Oh, maybe, and so like now it's simple to connect. It's just like, well, duh, we can all do it. You're doing it right now.
Yeah.
That's like, that was a gateway for me for sure. The gateway to spirit.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that. And it's like, I'm sure there's so much more about spirituality that I haven't even like learned yet, which I have to ask because I don't think I've ever asked another podcast guest, but since we're talking about spirituality, have you ever done psychedelics? Like, have you ever tried ayahuasca or anything? Because you've traveled a lot.
Yeah, no, I haven't. So I'm actually sober completely. And I have been for 5-6 years now. And I mean, I don't have any judgment towards people who do that. I don't do it for like a reason of like I wasn't an alcoholic or like anything like that, but I definitely didn't have a good relationship with it. And my intuition actually told me that it wasn't serving me. And then once I stopped, I just never really felt the need to go back. So I personally don't do that. And I love the fact that my spiritual awakening happened after, because I probably would have done psychedelics. Again, nothing that there's wrong with that, but I really feel like it's so empowering to know that we can connect ourselves as well without needing that. But it can be an experience, I guess, for people who do that.
Yeah. I wondered because I saw it on one of the shows I was watching that they did it, and I was like, oh my gosh, that looks intense. So I just never know. I'm like, who's trying to do has it?
Yeah. I feel like for me personally, I feel like if people are going to do it, it's always important to like really connect with like the real true intention of why. I feel like people who do ayahuasca, like really genuinely, like they get like a call to it. Like they're just like, their intuition's like, do it kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you still have to be so careful with who you do it with and like
Right.
like how the ceremony is and the intention behind it, because at the end of the day, it's still a drug, you know what I mean? So I definitely don't think anybody needs it. And I think if it's something that people want to experience, then just be really clear of your intentions for it.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally get that. And just like, it just brings back to where, as if you live very intentionally, then everything just, it lessens the chaos. I know that. Like, there's someone that I know that like literally everything just feels like everything's just a mess. And I'm like, I feel like if you were just more clear on what you were trying to accomplish, or just your environment, even the people you surround yourself with, things would not be so chaotic. I mean, it's almost just like, like with the things you're experiencing, sometimes you could be attracting with your own things. So it's definitely another aspect. But this has been so cool, just like chatting with you about your gifts and your journey, and the digital nomad thing. Like, I had an opportunity to do it, but I missed it by a smidge because then I found out I was pregnant. I'm like, darn it, I wanted to. It was going to be I think it was going to be a year, and every couple weeks to a month you would go to a different location. But I was like, darn, it wasn't timing. So
we were actually it's so funny because we planned to keep traveling while I was pregnant, but then like our intuition just said, no, it's time to settle down. And also by that point, to be honest, we were over it, because it's friggin' exhausting moving all the time and not having anywhere to like store your stuff, because we were also only traveling with carry-on. So we literally own nothing in the world but 2 carry-on suitcases. And we were kind of feeling like, we'd like to own more than like 2 t-shirts. We'd like to have like a reliable toaster that we just always know. And so we thought, let's like get a home, and then that will be our base to travel from. And then literally the pandemic hit. So it was perfect timing. And then I was so sick during my pregnancy. Like for the first 4 months of the pregnancy, we traveled through Canada, America, Indonesia, New Zealand, Australia, and we were also in Hawaii, which I know is the USA, but it feels like a completely different part of it. I had like hyperemesis, the like severe nausea and vomiting in my pregnancy. So for 42 weeks, I was throwing up every day. And at the beginning, I was throwing up like 30 times a day, and I was so sick. Like, I look back, I'm like, how did I even do that? Like,
such a trooper doing that while traveling. Oh my gosh.
It was honestly, it was horrible. Fine, but I did not feel good.
Oh my gosh. Well, at least your baby has been everywhere, because that's how I feel, because
I know.
literally already traveled so much. When I was pregnant, so I had a trip planned to Jamaica, and I was going to be pregnant during that trip. It was an all-inclusive trip. So I was like, oh, this is going to be so much fun. And then I was like, all right, well, blood test is showing I'm pregnant. So my son's actually been to Jamaica and just like a lot through Florida while he was still in the womb. So cool. He's a water baby. He loves water so much. He's a Cancer. And so I think it's funny that he's been to some of the most tropical places while in the womb, and now all he wants to do is be in the water. So I'm like,
that's so cool.
That's pretty crazy to me. Yeah. So tell our listeners where they can find you online and connect with you.
Yes, I would love that. The best place to connect with me is on Instagram. I'm at Viola Hug. Super easy to find. I'm legit the only one. Like, not many other Viola Hugs out there. And I do have a Facebook group and stuff, but that's all linked in my IG bio anyway. So if you want to see my vibe, see me being silly on my stories, see what I'm like, how to work with me, any of those things are all connected on my Instagram. So come find me over there. If you're not on IG, you can find me on Facebook too, but IG is like my favorite.
No, totally. And I just think it's so awesome of, the women that you work with. And if you're ever feeling inspired or anything to work with someone that has reached multiple 6 figures and everything in their business, Viola is definitely the person you want to talk to. So thank you all again for listening. And thank you, Viola, for coming on the show. And we'll catch you all next time.